What's up, YouTube? I'm Toro here from Fightful. This is the Fightful Boxing Podcast, April 21, 2017. I'm going to be doing a bit of a solo short podcast for today. Steven had a bit of troubles, issues back home. His son wasn't feeling well this morning, so he had to take care of him. I completely understand. I'm not a father, but I understand when you have to take care of a loved one, and this kind of stuff you kind of can't really predict. So best wishes to Steven and your kid. It's not something Daryl, but he just couldn't be here today. So for today, it's going to be a bit of a shorter podcast. Again, with no Steven, but I am still going to preview Andre Berto versus Shawn Porter. I was at the press conference yesterday in Brooklyn, and there were a couple of interesting things happening there at that press conference. They're also going to be previewing the Top Rank pay-per-view. That's also going to happen on Saturday night. And the latest on Klitschko versus Joshua. And now we finally have a TV deal. And as Steven and I were talking on the last podcast we did last Friday, it's going to be a sort of joint broadcast between HBO and Showtime. Showtime's going to air the fight live around 4:45 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States. So that's going to be a live broadcast, and HBO is going to be broadcasting that fight again on their channel, I believe around 10:30 p.m., 10 o'clock, much later at that night. So you're going to have couple of chances to watch that fight, and it's going to be a major fight. I cannot stress enough just how much this fight actually does mean for the heavyweight division in boxing. And overall, I think it's going to be a fantastic fight. Hopefully on the next week's podcast, Steven and I will preview that a little bit more in detail. But for now, this Saturday, Berto versus Porter, and I'm going to start off with that. Berto versus Porter is going to be a very interesting fight. This is not for a title. This WBA welterweight title eliminator. Whoever wins is going to go up against Keith Thurman much later this year for Thurman's WBA title. And I would assume maybe also for his WBC title that he won off of Danny Garcia 6 weeks ago at the Barclays Center. That fight's also going to be at the Barclays Center, Berto versus Porter. And we're going to have complete coverage of that. I'm going to be there live. So once again, it's going to be a really fun night. We're going to bring you tons of coverage from that. And anybody that wants to, leave a comment on the live chat, if you have any questions whatsoever, I'm going to be sort of looking right now. See if there's any activity going on right now. Any questions about Berto versus Porter or the undercard, which is Jermell Charlo versus Charles Hatley for the WBC light middleweight title or junior middleweight title or super welterweight title, depends on how you like to call it, the 154-pound division. And then Amanda Serrano versus Diana Santana, Serrano's going to be making history if she wins. This is for the WBO bantamweight title, which is vacant at the moment. If Serrano wins, she will win her world title in her fifth division, her fifth weight class, which is something no other Puerto Rican has ever done, male or female, in the history of the grand sport of boxing. And I was talking to Joe Cortez, who's a legendary boxing referee. And those of you who have been boxing fans for quite a long time now, right? Spanning back in the early 2000s, 90s, 80s. And right now, that's, we were talking and, he was there, I guess, sort of showing support for Amanda Serrano, because this is a pretty big deal for us Puerto Rican boxing fans. And the simple fact that you have someone like Serrano, who is quickly becoming the face of Showtime boxing, women's boxing, I should say, because she also broadcasted the She was also fighting in her last fight on Showtime. I believe headline Showtime Extreme, if I remember correctly, back in January against Yasmin Rivas. Serrano looked phenomenal in that performance. It wasn't an overall make or break the sport type of fight. Serrano kind of cleaned house in that performance, and I thought that she did admirably. I don't remember how exactly I scored it for her. I think maybe I want to say it was between eight rounds for Serrano, 8 or 10 for Yasmin Ribas. And I think right now that's going to be I think she's also going to have a relatively easy time. And right now, the fact of the matter is, this fight is big in the sense for women's boxing. And sorry, my mother was calling me in the middle of my show while she knew that I was doing it. So yeah, back to what I was saying. So Serrano winning, competing this fight, she's quickly becoming a big name in women's boxing. Not that she already isn't, but now fans are actually going to watch her fights on a big channel such as Showtime. And, we've already seen guys like Clarissa Shields making splashes as well. She's also becoming a pretty big name in women's boxing in the United States. And you look at all the other Olympic champions who have been making their debuts in the past couple of weeks. I know Ireland and England, their champions and Olympic medalists have also been doing a lot of good attraction and viewership numbers fighting over there in the UK on the undercards of some of their fights. And so having this fight is pretty big. I was talking to Joe Cortez about her and what she's been doing for women's boxing and for Puerto Rican boxing, I should say, is that she is, and I kind of agree with Joe, she's a Hall of Famer. I think she is one of the greatest I think she is one of the greatest female boxers in the history of this sport. And certainly, I would say confidently that she is the best female boxer to ever come out of Puerto Rico, and one of the greatest, regardless of gender. And you look at the list of women, of male and women boxers who have competed under the Puerto Rican flag. I mean, we know who Miguel. A lot of people, boxing fans know who Miguel Cotto is. They know who Felix Trinidad is. And even going back even further, Wilfredo Gomez, Wilfredo Benitez, Hector Macho Camacho, the list just goes on and on and on. And for the fact that she is on the cusp of doing something she had none of those other guys I just mentioned do in their careers, winning a world title in 5 different weight classes, that's really something pretty exciting. It's something for the country who I know is in kind of not in the best shape right now. Having someone take the mantle of being like the face of Puerto Rican boxing now that Miguel Cotto is sort of retiring, this is his last year, and got an up-and-coming stars like as Felix Verdejo. They're still not at that mega star level for Puerto Rican boxing fans. So I think the numbers for the Showtime Extreme telecast that she is going to be fighting at are going to be pretty good. And I think it's very well deserved for her and for women's boxing to finally get a platform, to not just have a one-off appearance like, all right, we're going to have Amanda Serrano fight Yasmin Rivas on Showtime Extreme while we sort of whet people's appetite for the James DeGale and Bato Jack fight later on that night. But the Showtime's actually doing a legitimate effort. It's a legitimate effort to try to make women's boxing a bigger thing than it is. And in the grand scheme of things, with MMA and pro wrestling, with so many female stars coming out, I think Showtime is smart in recognizing, hey, there's money to be made in these women. And I don't mean to say that like a derogatory term, but it's like these women can be viewed as major stars, and we need to take advantage of that. And so I think Showtime is doing the right thing with Clarissa Shields and for Amanda Serrano. So I think right now this is going to be a pretty good fight. And that's just one of the fights. One of the really good fights on this undercard. We were supposed to have King Kong Ortiz fight as well on the undercard, and Steven and I, you can just go back to our last podcast. He's talk about how fun and exciting it is to watch King Kong Ortiz. He's a little bit up there in age, but boy, he can still go. He can still be in that world title conversation. But he suffered an injury and days after we did our last podcast, so he's out. He won't be fighting on the undercard. That was just confirmed by Lou DiBella yesterday's press conference. So it's a shame, but still the card's pretty strong. The co-main event is going to be Jermell Charlo versus Charles Hatley for Charlo's light middleweight title. And my goodness, the press conference yesterday, if you weren't sold on Charlo versus Hatley, and I don't know why you wouldn't be sold on Charlo versus Hatley if you're a boxing fan, but the press conference yesterday was certainly really interesting. So just to give a bit of a backstory, Hatley is being promoted by Don King, and they were having a bit of some issues, and Hatley and his crew are suing Don King for, and I don't remember the exact details, but it's something along the lines of contractual promotional obligations not being fulfilled. And so as Hatley was talking on the podium in Brooklyn yesterday, and he was sort of wrapping things up, about to sit down, somebody, and I'm assuming this is from Charlo's entourage, was yelled out, and this was like front row, it wasn't like in the back. He was right in center, staring at Hatley, saying, "Why are you suing Don King?" And he was on the left side of the room where we're doing the press conference. So he was right here. And then you see people from Hatley's entourage, like all the way over here. And this is a good, maybe like 30, 40 feet of distance between them. And they were just screaming at each other, yelling loudly. I mean, for a good 2, 3, 4 minutes. And they're just arguing. And then in the meantime, you kind of see Hatley and Charlo, one, at first kind of taking it all in, just letting their guys do the talking. And then both of them, they started to do a bit of trash talking on their own. And Hatley, he was saying, listen, I mean, what's Charlo been relevant for 3 years? Maybe I've been big my whole life. And I'm going to come in here. I'm the new sheriff in town, as he call it, and I'm going to whoop Charlo's ass. Sort of paraphrase a little bit. And boy, then the trash talking, there was a lot of tension, and they even had to bring in maybe security in there to sort of help, mediate the situation. And it did not. I mean, it a little bit helped. Things got quiet. But it was not. It was not good. This is going to be a pretty fun fight. It's going to be a really good fight. It might actually be the best fight of the night when it's all said and done, just because of how much heat there is between Charlo and Hatley. And Charlo was saying that his brother Jermell Charlo, he's going to be in his corner. So that's going to be pretty. So it's good for Charlo. He's going to have his brother, who's also probably equally as good a boxer as Jermell is. So it's almost like it's almost as if Hatley's going to be fighting both Charlo brothers. And I kind of think, to sort of give quick predictions, I think Charlo's going to win. I think Charlo's going to maybe not, I can say 10th, 11th round stoppage. If not, it's going to be a somewhat, I want to say a decently close fight. I'm going to say Charlo wins in the scores 8-4. But again, that's just my prediction. Things can very well change heading into the fight. During the fight, I should say. And now on to the main event, Berto versus Porter. As I mentioned, this is a WBA title eliminator. And I think with a lot on the line, and I think Porter is going to win this fight. And I'm going to explain why. Well, first of all, there's another reason why I think Porter's going to win this fight. Porter is, he's younger. He's not struggling as much as Berto has in the last few years. Berto is 4-4 in his last 8 fights. That's not a whole lot of steam coming in. Yeah, he's won a couple of world titles, but those reigns didn't last that long. Barely, only a couple of months. He would just win a world title and just lose it in his next fight. So there's really not been a whole lot of steam coming into him. And Porter is smart. Porter knows that Berto is not good when he's being pressured. And Porter is a guy that is able to come in and take the fight up close and throw a lot of punches at Berto and make him uncomfortable. I expect Porter to be working the body throughout the entire fight, just making this fight about as uncomfortable as possible for Andre Berto. And Berto does kind of bring a little bit more experience, I should say, but I don't think experience at this point kind of matter. One thing that Berto is also going to struggle is that he hasn't fought in a year. So he's going to have to be shaking out the ring rust. And Porter is certainly going to come in extremely hungry and very aggressive early on, I'm going to predict. Porter believes that he should have beaten Keith Thurman. He believes that he won the fight against Thurman last summer. I believe it was in July at the Barclays Center again. Keith Thurman won the WBA title via unanimous decision. And I kind of don't think that – I think with Berto, I don't know. I don't know if it's from – I don't know if it was still from the effects of going up against Floyd. But he just really has not looked great since beating Floyd. He didn't look good fighting Floyd a few years ago. Before in Floyd's final fight, well, at the moment, we don't know if this whole Mayweather-McGregor thing is going to happen. Bullet to my head, I think I'm going to say it will happen, but it's going to take another few months of negotiations before everything's all said and done. But I think with Porter, and there was like a media scrum after the press conference was done. And one thing that I thought was very interesting, Porter was saying that he wanted to outbox Berto, which in a vacuum, that's certainly not a bad thing. I mean, of course, in a fight, in a match, you always want to outbox the other opponent. That's the whole point. The whole point is to knock the guy out or to outbox him and win the scorecards. But Porter, the way he was kind of describing it is that he doesn't think that he's going to go all wild on Berto and throw haymakers all around. And I think that, playing it aggressive against the guys as Berto and making the fight aggressive and close is the way to go. But one thing that I thought was interesting is that, in the back of his head, that's not what he ultimately wants to do. He just wants to fight the best technical fight that he wants, which, again, and I think Porter's a slightly better fighter and a slightly better boxer technical-wise than Berto, but I think Porter has a much better chance winning this fight, going for the knockout, going for the early stoppage, just making Berto work as much as possible, as early as possible in the fights. And I think with the way, and if Porter wins, I think that it's going to be a very, very good rematch between Porter and Keith Thurman. So I think that's going to be a pretty damn good fight. That fight's going to be on Showtime, I believe, at around 9:30 Eastern Time. I think the two fights on the Showtime card is going to be Charlo versus Hatley and Berto versus Porter, while the other couple of fights on Showtime Extreme earlier in the night, around 7:30, is going to be Amanda Serrano versus Diana Santana. And Fightful's going to have complete coverage of that fight, and we're going to be bringing you tons of stuff. Don't be afraid to leave a comment in the live chat, thumbs up, leave a review, as Showdown Joe Ferraro says on his MMA podcast. Tell your friends, tell a buddy to tune in. If you're an MMA fan, you're a wrestling fan, you're a boxing fan, tune in. To Fightful. We do a ton of great stuff. I mean, yesterday we just had a really good podcast between Shawn Porter, Fightful's managing editor, and the king of bros, Matt Riddle, who hopefully I get to see go up against Drew McIntyre on Evolve this Sunday in Brooklyn. So, I mean, and I think that's going to be on Flow Slam. So if it is, if you can't make it to Brooklyn, I highly encourage you watching this match, Galloway versus Riddle in an I Quit match. That's about as good as you can get, and I believe that is Galloway's final Evolve appearance before staying strictly with WWE and NXT. So this is gonna be fun. This week we just introduced Patrick Cote to the Fightful team. We have so many other great podcast hosts. As I mentioned, Showdown Joe Ferraro, Sean Rossap, Shane Helms, Matt Riddle, Patrick Cote, Elias Theodoro, the man with the best hair and MMA, Frank Trigg, Sean Pearson. So many great podcasts. Even the wrestling ones. I can't forget about the wrestling podcast with Anna Bauer and Alex Pulowski, and the Fightful podcast with Jimmy Van. So I guess that's my little plug for everything that we got for Fightful. And I think with the fact with this, and Adam Pearson was saying, I'm going to the Joshua fight as it live in England and it's in Wembley. Yeah, that's going to be a fantastic fight, as I mentioned at the top of the show. It's going to be a record-breaking crowd, over 90,000. Easily going to be the best attendance for a boxing fight in England's history, and well deserved. This fight, the Joshua and Klitschko, it's going to be such an incredible fight. And I think this is going to be, in a way, kind of the passing of the torch. I think Joshua is going to win narrowly. I think this is going to be the best fight in the heavyweight division in several years. I know the levels of excitement in England are off the roof, and I think those two are going to have a heck of a fight. And I think now that we finally got a TV deal here in the U.S., I think we're going to get pretty damn great numbers if you were to combine the Showtime and the HBO telecast. And I'm actually going to be watching both. I think I might watch both telecasts, mainly because I want to see how the different commentators have their own take on the fight as the fight's progressing. And overall, it's going to be so much fun. Fightful is going to have a lot of coverage between this fight, between Joshua, Klitschko, between Berto versus Porter, and the Top Rank pay-per-view. That's also going to be happening on Saturday. And boy, I think I like what Bob Arum is doing. Arum is, and I'm going to pull up the whole card, or at least the whole pay-per-view card in just a second. And for those of you that aren't really that interested in the Showtime card, which I don't know why you wouldn't, you got guys, the top 4 fights: Jesse Magdaleno versus Adelson dos Santos, and I'm mainly pulling the card up just so I can also properly read the names so I don't mispronounce them, because they're not easy to pronounce, no offense. Junior featherweight title, Magdaleno versus dos Santos. You're going to have Gilberto Ramirez versus Max Bursak for the super middleweight title, and I think Gilberto Ramirez is going to win that fight. I think that I can see Gilberto Ramirez eventually fight James DeGale in a unification bout. That's going to be a lot of fun, since James DeGale, one, is still recovering from that hellacious fight he had with Battle Jack back in January, and that fight ended in a draw. So I think Gilberto Ramirez is going to retain, and I think we're going to see a unification bout at 168 pounds down the line. We're also going to have a non-title fight between Shakur Stevenson and Edgar Brito. Neither man are holding titles, so of course it's a non-title fight. 6-round featherweight bout. Again, this is just to further showcase Shakur Stevenson, who is going to be a pretty big name very, very soon. I think in the featherweight division, I think he's going to be a solid attraction. And who knows, maybe down the road, he'll fight for the WBO featherweight title, which will be Oscar Valdez, the champion, versus Miguel Mariaga. I like this setup that Top Rank is doing. I think that Bob Arum at the moment isn't thinking with business sense in terms of this is gonna make great numbers. We were talking in the and when I say we, I mean Stephen Muehlhausen and I. We were talking last week, and we both don't think this fight is gonna do good numbers on pay-per-view at all. I mean, it'd be a legitimate surprise if it reaches 6 digits amount of buys, considering that we have another really good boxing card for free at the Barclays Centers. But the fact that Bob Arum is willing to at least make the investment, and he's probably going to lose money on this fight, no question. But Bob Arum's going to say, screw it. I don't care if I lose money on this pay-per-view. I'm going to build these guys as stars, and I want them to have the exposure of fighting for a pay-per-view crowd. And these top-ranked pay-per-views, if we see more of them, I'm all for. I'm all for it. The Manny Pacquiao one that we had on back in November, that was a pretty good pay-per-view. It did 300,000 buys, which for most boxers, it's a good number. For Manny Pacquiao numbers, not great. But you see, but those 300 people that saw and bought the pay-per-view, they got a show. They got a damn good pay-per-view, one of the somewhat better ones of the year. And that, in November, that whole month was probably the best month for pay-per-views, or at least for boxing fights throughout that entire year, 2016, which I didn't think it was a great year for boxing. 2017 is a much better year. And I definitely would like to get Steven's input on this next time he joins the show, is that these pay-per-views are, one, they're pretty good from the little pay-per-views that we've had so far, because we have not had a lot of pay-per-views in 2017 so far. But the pay-per-views that we are getting are pretty damn solid. We're having multiple world title fights on these top-ranked pay-per-views, and I think that's the way to go. You build up a stacked card. You'll get some of the younger guys or some of the lesser-known stars out there with the main attraction, with the main audience of boxing, who may not go exactly out of their way to pay for a Jesse Magdaleno or a Gilberto Ramirez or an Oscar Valdez. But the exposure is going to be pretty good. And I think, if you were to ask me, I think it's going to do more than a 50,000 buys. A lot of people are thinking. And I think Steven was talking about how this fight, what this pay-per-view is going to do 50,000. I think it's going to do at least maybe 75,000. I think there is a lot of hype. I think the California and Mexico crowd are going to be lining up to buy this pay-per-view, because this is a very Mexican heavy card, and I think that's by design, because Bob Arum knows that there really isn't that the buck stops at Canelo Alvarez in terms of being the biggest name in Mexican boxing. But then you go down the list, it's debatable who would be the number 2 star. Maybe most definitely probably have to be Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. But really, what's he really done in the past few years? After he lost to Sergio Martinez decisively and soundly a few years ago, Chavez has not looked good at all. He struggled to maintain weight at 160 pounds, then to 168, and now to at 175 pounds. Now he's going to have to be going back to 165 and a half at a catch weight against Canelo Alvarez. It's going to do humongous numbers absolutely huge pay-per-view numbers. But after this fight, it's going to go downhill for Chavez. And so I think this is a great way, this pay-per-view that Top Rank is putting out, for all of these three guys to make their claim, I'm going to be the next big star in my country. So I think all three guys will retain. I think the one I feel most confident is Gilberto Ramirez retaining his title. But I feel confident in all three of those guys retaining their WBO titles. And we're going to be giving you a lot of coverage in terms of that. We're giving you articles on each of the three title fights. We're also going to be giving you recaps of the Showtime and Showtime Extreme card. A lot of good stuff. I mean, some of these fights, some of the guys on this new Brooklyn card, on the super low untelevised undercard, guys like Kenny Robles and Latore Woodbury, Joseph Williams, John Del Perdang. All these guys, these are exciting prospects. They're still a long ways away from making any actual impact in their respective divisions. But, I mean, Brooklyn is in New York City. They got a lot of untapped potential in terms of boxers. And I think these Brooklyn cards that Showtime is putting out, I think it's making these guys, getting these guys out there in terms of fighting for a big crowd. And I expect Shawn Porter versus Andre Berto to draw a big crowd. I don't know if it's going to do as much attendance-wise as the Keith Thurman versus Danny Garcia fight, because that one did, I believe, around 16,000 people at the Barclays Center. So I'm going to guess between 12 and 15,000 show up. It's definitely going to be more than the James DeGale versus Bato Jack fight. And that was just over 10,000, barely 10,000 attending that fight. I think it's going to be a really good fight. Lots of good stuff for this Saturday for boxing. And then you look at in Germany, and I'm going to talk really quick. Arthur Abraham versus Robin Krasnicki for the WBO super middleweight title eliminator. Winner of that fight, they get to fight Gilberto Ramirez should he retain the title, or maybe Max Bertzek if he pulls off the upset. So I think that's going to be the next fight. And then after that, maybe later in the year, we'll get that Gilberto Ramirez versus should he retain against whoever's going to win. And I think it's going to be Arthur Abraham. Gilberto Ramirez versus James DeGale. I'm really excited for that fight because James DeGale, he had a heck of a fight against Bato Jack. Really, really fun fight. And then, some of the other fights all across the world this weekend. Martin Murray versus Gabriel Rosado. Not a lot in stake, but I think Martin Murray is going to come out on top. That's going to be in Liverpool. And then over there nearby Leicester for the WBO interim middleweight title, the vacant title between Aftandil Kurtzitzi versus Tommy Langford. And then on the undercard, you got Zolani Teat versus Arthur Villanueva for the WBO bantamweight title. It's a bantamweight title eliminator. So I think right now you have this fight. This might be an eventual fight with Gennady Golovkin way down the road, probably after Golovkin is done with Canelo Alvarez. That could be another fight. I'm not sure if it would be a pay-per-view fight, but you can get maybe Tommy Langford holding the interim title, holding it until Golovkin is done with his major fights. And should Golovkin win and beat Canelo Alvarez, barring any immediate rematch that there may or may not be in their contracts, if that fight should happen, because I still don't think it's a matter of when, but if. Langford versus Golovkin or Kurtzitzi versus Golovkin, that could be a really good HBO TV card. That could be a really good fight on HBO TV. So overall, I think there's going to be a lot of great fights this weekend. And I just want to take a really quick look at the undercard for this Joshua Klitschko fight, which, if you can't tell, I'm excited for. Joshua versus Klitschko for the IBF and Bacon WBA heavyweight title. Lightweight eliminators versus between Luke Campbell and Darley Perez. I think Perez is going to win that one. Really quick prediction. Scott Quigg versus Viral Simeon in a featherweight bout. I think Quigg's going to come out on top of that one. And yeah. And I think right now this is what's so great for this month. And Steve and I were talking about this last week. The month of April, May, June, July, these next 4 months are going to be absolutely insane for the sport of boxing. It really is. Look at all the fights that we've had. All the major fights that we've had so far in 2017. You can argue maybe some of them weren't as great as we were hoping for, but we still got the big fights. We got several unification bouts. We got the Gale versus Jack unifying titles at 168 pounds. You got Garcia versus Thurman unifying titles at 147 pounds. Joshua versus Klitschko technically unifying titles at heavyweight. Ward versus Kovalev. My God, that's going to be a heck of a fight later on in the summer. Manny Pacquiao. The Pacquiao World, as Steve and I would say, quote-unquote, retirement tour between Jeff Horn in Australia. That's going to be a pretty fun fight to see, if not for the absolute fact that Pacquiao's going to absolutely demolish Jeff Horn. No doubt about it. But it's going to be a great sight. It's going to be a great story. Horn versus Pacquiao in front of 50,000 people at Australia. That's certainly an interesting one. Not actually a super attractive fight on paper because Horn is nowhere near Pacquiao's league, but he's a big name in Australia, and Pacquiao's promoter, that's what he wants. He wants to fight big names in their respective countries all over the world. And I hope that after Pacquiao's done with Jeff Horn, that we'll see an Amir Khan versus Pacquiao fight, because I think that's could be a really fun fight. Could attract a lot of big numbers, because as much as Amir Khan maybe has not lived up to his potential, he is still a star in British boxing and over there in the Middle East. And so that proposed fight between Pacquiao and Amir Khan taking place in the UAE, if that fight should happen, that's also a pretty fun fight to watch. It's certainly going to be Pacquiao's best fight in a long time, in several years, because Amir Khan is still pretty good. I don't know how he'll look after he's done with it, after he's fully recovered from his surgery, because according to him, the surgery that he had done has been an injury. I believe it was a wrist injury or a hand injury. It's somewhere around that area. It's been an injury that's been nagging him throughout his entire career that he never got fixed. So, I mean, and that might be the reason why he never lived up to being the next great megastar that a lot of people were hoping that Amir Khan would be. Is that he's had a pretty bad injury throughout the majority of his professional career. And if Amir Khan recovers nicely, looks fantastic in a tune-up fight, goes up against Manny Pacquiao and beats Manny Pacquiao for the welterweight title, I think we then could see Amir Khan finally living up to all the hype that he's had throughout his entire career. And I'm rooting for Amir Khan, because at first I wasn't a huge fan of Khan, because I thought he was overhyped. He didn't look that great to me. He didn't look like he would translate well to a mainstream star. But I still think he's a fantastic fighter. I still think he's pretty good. So Pacquiao versus Khan, I'm all for it. But right now, all we got to wake up for is Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn on the 4th of July weekend. So that'll be fun. It'll be a nice little slaughter fest that we'll see. Because again, I don't even see this fight going 12 rounds. I really don't. I think this is going to be a somewhat short fight. I certainly think Pacquiao is going to knock out Jeff Horn in the middle of the fight, maybe 5th, 6th, 7th round. You know, unless Horn impresses me, like, I don't know, doing his media workouts or anything like that. Or I look even further on his last fights and see that, you know what, maybe I was wrong, and maybe he can bring up the fight to Manny Pacquiao. Unless my mind changes drastically, I don't see this fight being competitive at all. I really don't see it. So yeah, I think we're gonna wrap things up pretty soon. As I mentioned, this is gonna be a solo. This was a solo podcast. Steven had to take care of his kid, who woke up this morning with a fever, and best wishes to him and his kid. It's nothing serious, but this is something you have to take care of, and I completely understand. So I don't mind running the ship solo for this week. I would have loved to have heard Steven's thoughts about this Top Rank pay-per-view more in detail. I know we talked about it briefly last week, and I wanted to get his opinion on Berto versus Porter, but we'll definitely talk about the fallout of those two cards in the next podcast. Hopefully we'll do it either early next week or our regular Thursday/Friday slot. And we'll also previewing Klitschko versus Joshua. Boy, that's going to be such a great fight. I'm really excited for this fight. Leave a thumbs up on the YouTube video. It really helps us out. Please and keep supporting Fightful. We've only 9 months in, but we've already done so many great things. I mean, just look at the roster we have for our podcast, for MMA, boxing, and wrestling. It is about as good a podcast network for combat sports as you will find anywhere else on the internet. Anywhere else. Lots of great stuff. Current UFC fighters joining the show. Recently retired UFC fighters, UFC Hall of Famers, former WWE champions joining the show, joining our podcast networks in Shane Helms. The best, I'm going to say one of the best independent wrestlers right now in the world, Matt Riddle. He's Fightful. He's Fightful exclusive. And again, and another plug for Matt Riddle's match against Drew McIntyre. I don't remember if he's going to be called McIntyre or Galloway on the Evolve show on Sunday, but regardless, those two are going to have an outstanding I Quit match. I don't expect anything less, but absolute stellar wrestling. That's how good Matt Riddle is. That's how good Drew Galloway is. And always check out the Fightful broadcast. Super fun, super chill between Sean Ross Sapp and Matt Riddle. The Wednesday podcast between Sean Ross Sapp and Jimmy Van. Those are always fun. Always getting a look behind the scenes between a guy who runs a wrestling site and, as Sean would call, the eccentric millionaire in Jimmy Van. And then you got me, the hippest, youngest, coolest cat in all of Fightful. Okay, well, maybe I'm just one of those three. I'm definitely the youngest. I can definitely vouch that I am the youngest of Fightful. But again, thank you so much for the 3 weeks worth of really good numbers on our boxing podcast between Steven and I. We are blown away by the support. We're blown away by the positive reaction, the positive feedback, and we will continue to keep getting better as we get more comfortable doing this podcast, this boxing podcast between Steven and I. And please support Fightful. Go to Fightful.com, check out the latest for UFC, MMA, WWE news, independent wrestling news, boxing all over the world. We have tremendous writers such as Alex Pulowski, Stephen Muehlhausen, my podcast partner. He does great interviews. Just had one with Alberto El Patron, which you can definitely check out on Fightful.com or on the Fightful YouTube page. So many great members of the staff, and I'm really grateful to be a part of this group. So again, this weekend we're gonna have tons of coverage of Berto versus Porter live from the Barclays Center. I will be there and will be in charge of the action in there in terms of live discussion, live coverage, and then we'll be just churning out recap articles on the Top Rank pay-per-view. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to be a really great Saturday for boxing. and I'm going to be watching every single fight of it. Maybe not live, but at some point before the next podcast, I'm going to have so much to talk about with Steven in terms of this weekend's fights and Joshua Klitschko. So be on the lookout for a supersized boxing podcast next week. So Carlos Toro signing out for Fightful.com and the Fightful Boxing Podcast. See you next week.